How's that for a slice of fried gold?
You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
I'll be back.
There's a flesh wound. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Take your sticking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
Ready to talk about Pumpkinhead. Out of the womb, ready to talk about Pumpkinhead.
We're all out of the womb.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily,
I was resurrected in an old pumpkin patch.
it would give us more to talk about if we were still in the womb. I think it would be an interesting twist on this podcast.
If we were like currently still in the womb.
Also, great.
Man, it'd be really hard to watch movies.
Great recording quality in the womb.
That's true.
So
good soundproofing.
I was gonna say the soundproofing's amazing.
Really huge echoey hall outside of Justin's mom's, though.
Wow.
It's back. It's back.
We're doing that again, huh?
We sure are. Look at this guy.
King of the callbacks here.
Yep.
Well, hello and welcome to Cinema Shock. This is the podcast exploring the stories behind your favorite cult and genre films. We do all the research so that you don't have to. We're the three guys that tell you everything you need to know about your favorite movies and the people who made them. I'm one of your hosts, and my name is Gary Horne.
I am co-host Justin Bishop.
And I take DUIs and motorcycle safety very seriously. I'm writer-comedian Mr. Todd A. Davis. This is the Roulette episode, where we watch a movie chosen at random and dissect it for you fine folks as a breath of fresh air between our regularly scheduled series.
Did you say fresh chair?
Fresh air.
I heard fresh chair.
You would.
I don't even know what that means. So, yeah, Cinema Shock. This is Cinema Shock Roulette number 3.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our third time doing this. We're going to do this in between series, like Todd said. This time, the Wheels of Fate have chosen a fun movie that kind of ties into our last James Cameron series pretty well, I think. And that was not planned. It was just a happy accident, just a happy little accident.
We're all happy accidents, really.
What do you guys think the dirt budget was on this movie? Pretty high. It was only a $3 million production, so at least like $1 million in dirt.
1.25
million in dirt.
They always overestimate.
So we just concluded our series on James Cameron. Hopefully you guys all listened to that. It went on for, I don't know, a year and a half or so, I think, is about how long we talked about James Cameron. And one person that we talked about pretty regularly over the course of that series was Stan Winston. Winston is a legendary makeup effects creator. If you're listening to this show, I'm sure you've heard the name, but he was very instrumental in the shaping of Cameron's career. He created the Terminator endoskeleton puppet and the makeup effects for the Terminator films. He created the Alien Queen and Aliens, and he also co-founded James Cameron's digital effects company, Digital Domain. So it seems really serendipitous that in choosing our next Cinema Shock Roulette entry, the Wheels of Fate have given us a chance to really take a dive into Stan Winston's career as we discuss his directorial debut, Pumpkinhead.
Looking for an old woman. She lives somewhere in the mountains hereabouts.
All she can do is take you straight to hell. You go home and you bury your boy.
Some folks say as how she's got powers.
Who are you?
Ed Harley.
What do you want, Ed Harley? Say it. You're looking for vengeance. Vengeance. Say it. There's an old graveyard way back deep in them woods. The thing you're looking for is in there.
It was an accident.
No, not like this, not like this.
It's gotta run its course. Now it begins. It begins.
most of you were dug up before this film was around, but just to cover ourselves like a little kid's pair of Coke bottle lenses, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, we're going to get into a lot of the nitty gritty on Pumpkinhead, as Todd said. So Stan Winston was born on April 7th, 1946 in Richmond, Virginia. After graduating high school, he studied painting and sculpture at the University of Virginia. He graduated there in 1968. And then in 1969, he moved over to the West Coast. He wanted to go to Hollywood. He was actually an aspiring actor, believe it or not. But after spending a little bit of time in Hollywood, he struggled to find work. He had a young family to support, so he needed to do something where he was bringing in a little bit of income. So he began to work as an apprentice makeup artist at Walt Disney Studios. There, he worked under the head of Disney makeup department, a guy named Robert J. Schiffer, Bob Schiffer. Bob Schiffer was a Disney legend, or is a Disney legend. And he got his start back in the 1930s. 1932 was when he got the start in the makeup business. He did makeup on the Marx Brothers horse feathers at the age of 17.
Wow. God.
Then throughout the 1930s, he worked on films like Mutiny on the Bounty, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and The Wizard of Oz. He arrived at Disney in 1968, not long before Winston arrived. And then throughout his tenure at Disney, which lasted until his retirement in 2001, Schiffer worked on everything from Bedknobs and Broomsticks to The Shaggy DA to Tron and Splash. He even helped turn a dog into a Frankenstein monster in the 1984 short film Frankenweenie, which was an early effort by Tim Burton, which is, of course, a guy that Stan Winston's going to end up working with a lot over the course of his career. And I mentioned, Schiffer's background because this is kind of to say, Winston's, when he entered the business, he was working directly under like one of the legendary guys in the business. This is a pretty promising start to a very promising career.
Yeah. And Todd should also appreciate looking back on Stan Winston when he was graduating and going into the University of Virginia. He was also a stand-up comic.
Was he?
Yeah, he was a stand-up comic working in that, which got him into acting. And then that's when he went to the West Coast.
That was
wild. Really weird. So yeah,
God, I wonder if there's any sound clips or footage of that. That would be so wild.
Not a lot of camcorders floating around in the 1960s. So.
That's true.
Unless he ended up on Ed Sullivan or something, I don't think you're going to find anything.
Right.
Well, when he was a kid, Stan Winston had been fascinated by puppetry and mask making, which is what led him to pursue that Disney apprenticeship. But it was during his time working under Schiffer that he truly found his passion for makeup effects, and he embarked on an entirely new career path. A couple years later, 1972, Winston founded his own company, Stan Winston Studio, and a year later, in 1973, he actually won his first Emmy for his effects work on a made-for-TV film called Gargoyles.
Not the cartoon show from the 90s.
Not the cartoon show. This is I look it up. These gargoyles look really silly, but I guess by 1973 made for TV standards, they were enough to get you an Emmy. So he worked on a few other TV projects throughout the 1970s. He won his second Emmy in 1974 for his work on the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. He even worked on the Star Wars holiday special during this time. He created the Wookiee costumes for that, the Wookiee Life Day stuff. Yeah. He also worked on several episodes of the Planet of the Apes TV series.
Bruce Valanche co-wrote the Star Wars holiday special. It's mostly important just so that he gets yet another mention on this podcast. When if you'd asked me like a year ago, I'd say he'll never get mentioned on this podcast.
Bruce Valanche is a legend. Of course, he's going to come up again and again. Winston had worked on a few movies during this time as well, often uncredited and often on films that were kind of low budget exploitation types. Movies like The Bat People. A movie called The Bat People, believe it or not, was not an A-list movie. That was produced for the low-budget production company American International Pictures, who released a lot of Roger Corman stuff. But his first high-profile film credit was Sidney Lumet's 1978 film The Wiz, a reimagining of The Wizard of Oz. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with it. It's got Michael Jackson as the Scarecrow, Yeah. So he did the makeup effects for that. Then in 1981, he worked on 4 films that year. He worked on an early Oliver Stone horror film called The Hand. He did some uncredited work on Friday the 13th Part 2. He worked on Gary Sherman's Dead and Buried, of course, which we discussed in full during our Dan O'Bannon series a while back. So if you want the nitty gritty on that one, head back to that episode.
He made that badass. Remember that badass body in the hospital bed, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
So good.
That were
I forgot about that. Yeah,
with the needle in the eyeball. That were like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
how'd they do this?
And it turns out it's a full life-size animatronic, basically, or a puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also in 1981, he worked on Heartbeats, a movie directed by Rock and Roll High School's Alan Arkush. I think we've actually mentioned this movie before, maybe back on our Dead and Buried episode. This movie starred Andy Kaufman and Bernadette Peters as two robots who fall in love. So they're in full prosthetic makeup. Google some images of Heartbeats. It's Andy Kaufman as a robot the whole movie. So it's very.
Can we go ahead and get Heartbeats added to the list of roulette episodes?
I'm pretty sure it's already on there.
Is there?
If it's not, we'll make sure it is. But Heartbeats is notable because it landed Winston his first Oscar nomination. This was actually the inaugural award in the category of best makeup. First time they'd ever given one. He got nominated for it. Though he did lose to Rick Baker for An American Werewolf in London, which is, if you're going to lose to, that's the one to lose to. But still, that's a pretty promising start to the 1980s for Stan Winston, which that period proved to be the most creatively fertile period of his career. I mean, when you think of Stan Winston, I think the majority of the stuff you think about is in the 80s up to the early 90s. That's when you really think of the golden age of makeup effects.
Sure.
It was his work with Rob Bottin on John Carpenter's The Thing, where he was actually brought in to help complete some designs, primarily the dog thing, but basically we'll get into the story of The Thing later on. But basically Rob Bottin and his crew, they had so much to create on that movie that they had to get some outside help, and they called on Stan Winston because they were friends to come help. And that work, even though the movie didn't do particularly well, it really got him noticed and it brought him to prominence in Hollywood.
If you're overwhelmed and you need assistance, props to Rob Bottin for bringing in the best possible person,
right,
to handle this. Which he makes a weird fucking hand puppet for that dog. That
I love it.
Is awesome.
It's so good. Following that film, he did work on Friday the 13th Part 3. He actually created a new sculpt for Jason's head for that one. That's the first one where Jason's got, the hockey mask and stuff on. He created the Mr. Roboto face mask for the band Styx. So go look up that video if you want to see that work. Nice. He worked on the short-lived TV series Manimal. And of course, in 1984, he created the Terminator for James Cameron. And his work on the Terminator gave Winston a whole new level of fame. With that film, he became one of the premier makeup and special effects technicians in Hollywood. He followed up the Terminator with John Carpenter's Starman. He did Ghoulies. He did Tobe Hooper's Invaders from Mars, which we've also talked about on the show. He did James Cameron's Aliens, for which he won his first Oscar. He did The Monster Squad, and he did Predator. This is all over the course of less than 5 years.
He's like the second. I think he was like the second ever special effects person to get a star on the Walk of Fame. He's a Stan Winston's kind of a big deal.
I wonder who the first was. Maybe Dick Smith.
I don't know.
Might have been one of the Westmore family. I've been finding their stuff all throughout Star Trek, but yeah.
I just feel like Dick Smith is when people talk about the godfather of makeup effects, Dick Smith is the guy.
I'm somewhat of a Dick Smith myself.
Thank you. I was waiting on
which is what's weird is this. It's all going to come together in this episode.
That's right. And then, so not long after he's worked on Predator, he received the script for a script from Dino De Laurentiis for something called Pumpkinhead, which is a horror film based on a poem by someone named Ed Justin. De Laurentiis was actually interested in hiring Winston to create the film's creature effects. He wanted him to create the titular Pumpkinhead, but Winston saw this as an opportunity to make his directorial debut.
Nice.
So it seems odd when I had no idea going into this movie, and I've seen this movie quite a few times, but I had no idea that it was based on a poem, even though it says it in the opening credits. I guess I just never clocked that. So it seemed weird to me that a poem of all things would be optioned for the basis of a horror movie. That's not exactly what happened. We'll get into the details on that. And I tried to look up a little bit more info on the poet, on Ed Justin, but every time, if you look him up, all you find is Pumpkinhead.
Yep.
So I would like to hear our own Mr. Todd A. Davis is going to perform a dramatic reading of this poem so that we can kind of get the gist of what it is about this poem that would inspire an entire film.
I'd be happy to. Here we go. By Ed Justin. Keep away from Pumpkinhead. Unless you're tired of living. His enemies are mostly dead. He's mean and unforgiving. Laugh at him and you're undone. But in some dreadful fashion, vengeance he considers fun and plans it with a passion. Time will not erase or blot a plot that he's been brewing. It's when you think he's forgot, he'll conjure your undoing. Bolted doors and windows barred, guard dogs prowling in the yard, won't protect you in your bed. Nothing will. From Pumpkinhead.
All right, thank you, Todd. That was very dramatic and kind of spooky, honestly.
Unnecessarily creepy, Todd.
My pleasure.
It started off as like a fucking one of the podcasts I listen to sometimes when I go to sleep is from Tracks to Relax, and it's like they tell you like a story or walk you through a guided sleep meditation. The waves like gave me that at first. I thought that's what was going to happen, or the wind or whatever that was, and then it turns into this fucking Pumpkinhead shit. I could just imagine trying to fall asleep to that. Like, oh well, now I'm not tired at all.
Why do I now?
Well, the way that this poem got turned into a horror film is actually a pretty interesting story. Back in the 1970s, two friends named Mark Carducci and Gary Horne had the idea to write a backwoods horror story. Neither Carducci nor Horne had many credits to their names. Pumpkinhead would, in fact, end up being the first film that Horne was ever involved with, while Carducci's only real credit before Pumpkinhead was the 1986 horror film Neon Maniacs and a single episode of Tales from the Dark Side, the TV series that was produced by George Romero. But at the time they were working on this backwoods horror story idea, they were just a couple of kids who wanted to get into movie making. And of course, where do you start but with a backwoods horror movie? I mean, that's where so many people get their start in filmmaking. So they started coming up with some ideas for the story, one of which was called The Seven Gargoyles of Satan, which sounds like a pretty cool like death metal band or something.
Yeah.
The concept of this story was that for each of man's sins, there was a different demon. And in their story, the monster would be the demon of revenge. And they had planned on this being just a little kind of low budget 16 millimeter horror film, something to get their foot in the door. And they actually started working on some early pre-production for the film, which by that point they'd renamed Armageddon. It's a little less wordy, I guess, than The Seven Gargoyles of Satan, which sounds like it would be, you know, an AIP picture from the 60s or something. For their monster design, they kind of went the John Carpenter Halloween route, right? And they just went out to a costume store, a Halloween store, and they bought a Don Post Halloween mask, not of William Shatner this time, but of the creature from the Black Lagoon. And then they modified it to create their demon. Well, nothing ever really happened with that film, whatever reason. I'm not sure why it never got made, probably because, you know, they didn't have the money to do it or they didn't have the resources or whatever. But years later, Carducci pitched this concept of a demon of revenge to a couple of producers, and they went for it. They liked the idea. So he calls his friend Gary. He's like, hey, they went for it. They liked the idea about the revenge demon that we'd been working on, and they're going to produce this movie for us. but the demon has a new name now. It's called Pumpkinhead. Gary Girardi didn't know where the name Pumpkinhead came from. It turns out the name Pumpkinhead, the idea to call the demon Pumpkinhead came from one of those producers that he had been meeting with, a guy named Billy Blake. Now, Billy Blake, he didn't have a very impressive resume before this, still didn't really have much of an impressive resume after this. But his only real credit before Pumpkinhead had been as a co-producer on Rhinestone, the Sylvester Stallone Dolly Parton movie that was directed by Bob Clark, the Porky's Christmas Story, Black Christmas, that guy, that Bob Clark. Nice. Not a great movie, despite the draw of both Sylvester Stallone and Dolly Parton being in a movie together. Well, a friend of Billy Blake's named Ed Justin had written this poem about a monster with the name Pumpkinhead. Billy Blake in interviews said that he thinks he just kind of wrote it for his kids, so it's kind of a lark, but he thought that would be a great name for a movie monster, Pumpkinhead. That's a cool name.
Yeah, this Ed Justin guy, apparently they said he was like in licensing, so that of course made this process a whole lot easier, I guess. But they were kind of familiar with him. I guess he did some stuff with Hollywood for that. It just that name is what really stuck with everyone. They just something about the name caught on, and so nobody could let go of it. Yeah, I mean, and if you read the poem or listen to Todd's reading of the poem, you can kind of see how that the concept of what he's describing in the poem does mesh pretty well with the idea of a demon of revenge. Like the two ideas kind of work together. So Carducci and Girardi, they got to work on the screenplay, and there were probably 7 or 8 drafts of the screenplay written before Stan Winston ever gets involved. They wrote a few more once Stan got involved in the writing process, because he helped with that as well. And most of the stuff I saw, just for the record, with like him, is he was like expanding on a lot of the themes that were in these guys had it down, but like Stan, like coming in, like really helped with, and I know we're going to talk more about Stan, but I mean, one of the examples I saw was like, he was a big fan of like Forbidden Planet as one of his favorite science fiction films. The idea of the creature coming out of the subconscious mind, that was one of the things like Winston actually added to it, because at first it was more like just a witch conjures up a demon or something. Oh, like that's cool, because that's a big part of the mythology of Pumpkinhead when you think about but Stan liked the idea of it coming from Ed Harley instead, and that sort of thing, and having to kill yourself to kill the demon and that sort of stuff. Interesting. So the producers shot the film all over Hollywood, and they were turned down by one studio after another until they met with legendary producer Dino De Laurentiis. Dino De Laurentiis saw something in the story, something promising, and before long, his production company, De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, signed on to finance the film. Now, this sounds like great news. Dino De Laurentiis is one of those like big names in genre filmmaking, especially in the 80s, more than any other time. And at the time, they produced DEG, the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group. They produced some pretty great stuff during this time period. They produced Michael Mann's Manhunter, which is the first appearance of Hannibal Lecter. Yeah. David Lynch's Blue Velvet, Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2, and Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark, starring Lance Henriksen. But little did the filmmakers know that the involvement of De Laurentiis would actually end up spelling the film's doom. Yeah, it's worth mentioning. Alex Benedetti was one of the guys that was like a big fan of this too, and he's the executive producer on Pumpkinhead, but he's also on Evil Dead 2, and so De Laurentiis was financing that, and so somehow that all worked out. He's Dino De Laurentiis' son-in-law, and so that's how that worked out. Yeah, so that's so it was it smoothed it over for an easy sell, basically. So is he married to Giada? I don't know how many kids De Laurentiis has. I think she's just the only one I know. Yeah, I think that might have been it, but they're divorced, whoever it was now, but they're divorced now. Yeah, it's kind of sad actually. This the other writer, Mark Carducci. Yeah, he ended up killing himself not long after this. Not long after this, just a couple of years later, I think. Jeez. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know why that just randomly should have been brought up, but there it is. I'm sure we would have come around to it at some point anyway. But it was De Laurentiis who reached out to Stan Winston about the film, wanting him to create the creature, as we said before. But Winston saw something in Pumpkinhead that made it seem kind of perfect for his first film as a director. It was a small film
for one thing. It had a relatively low budget, and he felt that because of the small size and scope of it, it was something that he'd be able to handle as a first-time director. So he agreed to create the creature effects for De Laurentiis, but only if he could direct the movie as well. Ironically, though, Winston didn't actually create the Pumpkinhead creature personally. As he focused on refining the film's narrative, working on the script alongside Mark Carducci, Gary Horne, and Richard C. Weinman, who's another one of the producers. He's got a story credit on this as well. Winston passed the job of creating the creature to other artists at Stan Winston Studios, which was a team led by Alec Gillis, Shane Mahan, John Rosengramp, and Tom Woodruff Jr. This was actually the first time that he'd ever fully turned over the creature design to his crew.
He had been working on, according to the Winston Effect, that art book that he put out. I saw some stuff from that. And he had been doing the movie Parasite in 1982, which is like a Charles Band movie. Another name like Dino De Laurentiis, it just gets brought
Comes up all the time.
Yeah. But he got the, no pun intended, the bug to direct back then, and he'd been thinking about it ever since. And so when he saw this movie, he said, quote, it was a small picture, something I thought I could handle as a director, and I felt there was a lot that I could bring to the story. So I told the producers, yeah, I'll do the creature, but only if I direct the movie. So like what you were saying, what sealed the deal for him is the writers got behind him. I think they originally had a guy, Armand Mastroianni was going to direct, but at this point, Winston had just done second unit directing for Aliens with James Cameron,
right,
and got a good report from there. And that success is what sealed them trusting him to do the directing job. They looked at him as, according to Gary Horne, he says there was this feeling that this was a first-class creature creator and a hell of a second unit director. So let's do this deal like he wants to do, and then we can give this low budget movie a monster that can stand next to Alien and Predator. And then the cool part is that when you get Winston as your director and revising the script and all this stuff, they talk about, like, one of the best parts is like you just really get to, even with his crew, like plan out everything in the script. Like, you know exactly what you can do with the effects and what you're going to get away with and the cheapest, best way to do it. So they would do these rewrites. I think Carducci was in California and Horne was in like Brooklyn or something. They would like fly back and forth and revise some pages based on Stan Winston's stuff, send it to Stan. He would write it off or, like sign off on it. It said that one of the good things with Stan was he's such a horror buff in addition to a creature creator that we were all kind of on the same page on all of this. They said, like, for instance, for the sequence with the burned out church, Stan knew that we were all familiar with Howard Hawks' The Thing. So he said, what we should do here is some kind of moment with a silhouetted Pumpkinhead standing in the doorway. We'll do the backlighting on him and stuff. So like that was all described specifically in the script, exactly how it would look. They said the other thing they were taking to it, which I thought was kind of nice for this, is that James Cameron was a big influence on all of this. They said the funny thing is that his gritty, realistic flavor, what he had done with Aliens and the Terminator was at the forefront of their mind. It's the horror and sci-fi thing that he was pulling off, and that Stan had that in his mind too. They actually referred to Pumpkinhead during the filming as a backwoods Terminator.
I mean, you can definitely see the Cameron influence on it, especially in that shot you're talking about in the church. The way it's lit, like it's very, very much like a James Cameron movie. It really is. Yeah. And Winston, he went to his crew and he basically told them, hey, I'm the director on this. I'm the client. You guys are the effects guys. So, and it did, kind of like what you were saying, like it worked out really well because they had a shorthand, like a lot of times the way the crew talks about it is with a lot of directors, they kind of had to teach other directors like how the effects process works. That they didn't have to do that with Stan Winston because he invented the process, like he knew exactly what they could do and what he could ask them to do and what they'd be able to pull off. So they would draw out designs for the creature. They would present them to Winston. He would make suggestions just like any other director would. I have to imagine that he probably made more specific requests for changes than a lot of directors might, except for someone like James Cameron. But essentially it was like a director studio or effects studio relationship, just like any other film, just with less of the having to educate the director on how the effects business works.
Right.
And the design of this creature, as they were working on it, they really saw this as a labor of love, the special effects crew. They knew that this film meant a lot to Stan because it was his first film as a director, and they really wanted to do it right for their boss, this guy who they really respected and really liked.
Woodruff says in an interview with Icons of Fright, he said it was like your parents turning over the keys to the house and saying, okay, we're going to be back in 3 months. And he said every day was like an amazing day at work. You just felt like nothing is going or can go wrong with this movie. Not that it wasn't hard work. You just knew everything we built was going to be used the proper way because there's a director involved who knows and understands the importance to make your stuff work. The design of the creature they were talking about, that was the big discussion about. Girani was saying at first, he said Mark and I played around with the revenge demon as a Lovecraftian skelly monster like the ones in our Super 8 projects from way back. Then we got sidetracked into an interesting area. A lot of people thought, well, if it's called Pumpkinhead, it's got to have a pumpkin on its head. And we started getting into like doing like a Sleepy Hollow type creature where the witch would tell Ed Harley to go to the graveyard, dig up a corpse, cut its head off, bring it back. In the meantime, she's going to be carving out this pumpkin with evil eyes. When he brings the body back, she brings it all to life. But then Stan gets involved, he says, the greatest creature maker around. He says, you're not going to tell him to put a pumpkin on a body. So we got back to the Lovecraftian idea. It's still a bloated head, and we even threw in the extra line in the film about how he comes from the old pumpkin patch in the graveyard. Yeah. But he said Stan made it very clear because they were like, so do you want the jack-o'-lantern head? And he was just like, no, I do not want a pumpkin for a head. He said he comes from a pumpkin patch. Diseased.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah. And he's like, you could even have like weird faces on the pumpkins and stuff around it or something, just some kind of disease looking pumpkins. But the actual creature is not going to be that. He said they felt at the time in the 80s, especially as slashers were dying off and like more creature features were coming back, or at least some were, that it felt really easy to do. Like they said they felt like there were a lot of change-o head movies around and showing transformations. They liked the idea of creating something that you could really play a lot with shadows and let your imagination handle it. Just a weird fucking creature. And and I thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, when they went about designing it, they started by designing it on paper, pencil drawings, of course, and it went through several iterations during that initial process, kind of like what you're describing, them just working out ideas for what this thing's going to look like, because it's not really described in the script necessarily. But then once Stan Winston approved the design, the next step was to sculpt a full-size pumpkin head and the adolescent pumpkin head that we see kind of briefly towards the beginning. And to move along this process, they split up sculpting duties between them. Some of them would do the head, some of them would do the body. Winston actually chose Tom Woodruff, one of his effects guys, to portray Pumpkinhead in the film. Before creating the entire suit, they did what they called the trash bag test, where they created a version of the costume in all black. They basically wanted to see what it would look like in silhouette, how it would look when it moved, how it's like you're talking about, like how it moves as a shadow as opposed to just like big goofy looking creature, because they're going to backlight it. They're going to have it moving through the darkness, and that silhouette really has to work. We've talked about this on the show before, I think, where some of the greatest movie creatures all have like a great recognizable silhouette.
Oh yeah,
it's why Godzilla is so iconic. Because you can see a silhouette of Godzilla and you know exactly what you're looking at. So they got
the xenomorph, the predator.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So Woodruff gets in this suit. You can find footage of this on the Stan Winston Studios website, by the way, is a treasure trove of behind the scenes photos and videos. And you can see Tom Woodruff in this, it's like the shape of the Pumpkinhead suit, but it's just all black, just to kind of see how it's going to look moving on screen, because you could draw it out all you want. If it doesn't look right when it's in motion, it's not going to work.
Yeah, Rosengrant saying like, the best part for them with Stan is that, you mentioned this too, it's like the shorthand that you have with each other. It's like not something that you never get in another movie. So, we could go to him and ask, is this enough? Is this going to do it? And he could look at it and immediately say, yeah, that's fine. Or no, we need to do more. He said, normally you have like to overbuild, just in case the director changes his mind and wants something different or whatever. And he said, but like Stan knows exactly what the tools are, what we're going to need, what we won't need. And we don't have to like educate him like you do with most directors on what's possible. So it's just so much more fun because Stan can tell you exactly like, oh, I think you're going to need this and you'll probably use this. And it was just such a nice flow.
Well, that also helps them. This is a pretty small budget movie. I think it was about a $3 million production. So doing it that way and having a director who knows how to use the effects and what's going to be needed means that you're able to get the most for your money, because they're not creating parts of the creature or looks that they're not going to end up using and wasting money. So they were really able to efficiently use the portion of the budget that was allocated to creating the creature in a way that you might not have with a less experienced director or a director less experienced in creature effects. So to make Pumpkinhead taller, he's got those sort of backwards knees. Woodruff wore mechanical leg extensions. It's really wild to watch footage of him doing this. They're essentially like stilts, but his feet are kind of at an angle in these sort of iron shoes. And then the bottom of the foot is articulated. So as he steps, the foot kind of moves, like the toes kind of move along with him.
Oh, wow.
So he had to learn to walk on these for one thing.
Jeez.
So he, because he was there throughout the build process, because he is also one of the special effects guys, he was able to kind of practice using these leg extensions there at Stan Winston Studios before the shoot began. And they would, for scenes where you're going to see Pumpkinhead like in full body, they put a harness rig on him to help him walk upright, because otherwise it would have been very difficult to kind of balance, especially on the terrain where they're going to be shooting a lot of this movie.
Right.
Kind of a cool fun fact about those leg extensions. They were designed initially for the Predator. Like they were
back
used
when he was in his praying mantis looking phase.
Yeah. They had it on the Predator, and it just wasn't working to walk on the weird jungle terrain in those leg extensions. Like they just couldn't make it work. So this was a thing they had stuck back that they were like, we'll use these some other time on something. Yeah. And it worked out that way.
That's fun. I had no idea. That's really a really great connection.
Yeah, and they said that like even some of the dummies in the movie, like especially that Joel kid who gets real fucked up and he gets dropped from a tree at one point and like all this stuff, like that the dummies they're using there are from Predator as
really?
Well. Yeah,
they just save their dead body dummies.
Yeah, they were like, it's tough to find a good dummy. We just have these on the shelf. And
reduce, reuse, recycle. Right
there, you
go. They also built these articulated hands for close-up shots where you see like Pumpkinhead grabbing stuff. These fully robotic, puppeted hands made out of metal that they would, of course, put foam latex and stuff over. And then Pumpkinhead's face was a very complex animatronic. They talk about how in a lot of these movies, they have different heads for like different facial movements and expressions because you can't make them do everything. Well, they were able to build Pumpkinhead's face where the entire head, like the brows and the jaw and the mouth was fully articulated. So he can like open his mouth in a snarl or have this like kind of mischievous grin that Pumpkinhead has.
Wow.
It's
a very complex animatronic for the time.
Nice.
You forget how, like, when you watch it a few times, you start to realize, like, how what's the word I'm looking for? But just how aware Pumpkinhead is. He's not a mindless monster. Like,
no, not at all.
Like, he's very intelligent. He's like fucking with these people.
He's enjoying it.
Yeah, exactly. And
he's enjoying it.
But so the design with it, like the head, it's totally animatronic. The guy's seeing out of like the neck holes that are there for like he can see out of. So you got this fully animatronic head. But just to elaborate for a second too on that design, like Girani talked about, like when they were conceptualizing the thing, they were also, just to take it back to that Cameron thing I mentioned with the horror and sci-fi, he said we wanted to make it seem like it was another life form from another dimension. Like the famous line, magic is just another person's science. He says, what we view as magic is another realm of existence that we're not aware of yet. And that's how Stan and everybody approach Pumpkinhead. Like he's conforming to physical laws of somebody else's universe. What we might perceive as hell is like some kind of alien environment or some other dimension or something. But and for reference, they would use like some of the stuff. They said they looked at a lot of photos for cadavers and decomposing bodies and stuff like that. They said they definitely wanted to have the feel of something that had been dead and was partially human, but also kind of deformed and evil, monstrous, but
kind
not
of diseased.
Diseased. And they said, like, you know, they had that science fiction thought. They were also looking at like something folklorish, you know, like what would a legend describe it as when it's brought to life and that sort of thing. So I just thought it was kind of interesting stuff.
Well, so we've got our main character, I guess. I would consider Pumpkinhead the main character. The movie's named after him, so we've got him. He's settled. He's ready to go. We got to get the rest of the cast go though. We've got to get all the human cast. Well, in the lead role was Lance Henriksen as Ed Harley. I think Henriksen needs no introduction. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know all about Lance Henriksen. We talked about him quite a bit on our James Cameron series. He and Stan Winston had, of course, worked together on both the Terminator and Aliens. Aliens being one of, I think, Lance Henriksen's most iconic roles, alongside this one.
I would say, like, that's the one thing that gets me these last few times of watching it is just, I will die on the hill that Lance Henriksen does not get enough credit for him as an actor, like just like legitimately as an actor, not just like, oh, it's Lance Henriksen, that's fun, you know, like he's good in this movie.
He's good. I think that part of his reputation is comes from the fact that he appears in a lot of trash as well, and he can still be good in it. You know, I'll get to the Pumpkinhead sequels later, which he is good in his few scenes, but I think that because when you appear in that many like crappy movies, you start to get a reputation, or people forget how good of an actor he actually is, you know. And he's very good, and he's good in everything, but he is really good in this.
I felt the shit in this movie, like with his kid and stuff, like and I mean, man, I bought in. Like
he definitely does not phone in a single frame. Like,
not at all. Well, you know, he was so invested that he actually got fake teeth made. Those like crooked buck teeth he has, those are not his teeth. He personally went and had fake teeth made for him to wear to give him that like hillbilly buck tooth look. And actually the caps he put on actually chipped his real tooth, and he had to get it repaired later on. Yeah. But that was not something Stan Winston asked him to do. He just wanted to bring that to the character.
No, he went all in. I mean, he I think bought like most of the stuff set up around the cabin for himself and stuff, like the shotgun he uses.
He went and bought the silver dollars that he drops into the witch's cup as payment. Like he bought those for that scene. Like he thought that he should have some kind of payment for her. He said that like in that cabin where they filmed, he actually dropped some of them between the cracks in the floor, and that they're probably still there if anyone wants to go look for them.
Cinema Shock Road Trip.
That's a long road trip. That's on the other side of the country.
Oh, yeah.
I know this movie looks like it's set in our area, our neck of the woods, but it was filmed in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
There's a key like character thing. I know we were talking about Pumpkinhead being like the main character, but this is really like an Ed Harley movie. Like it's Lance is the star. Like he's definitely the guy. And you know, like, and I think they even know that. That's why they show him as a kid at the beginning, you know, that he sees the Pumpkinhead thing and stuff. Right. So it's a story about him. But I even think in the commentary track, they mentioned that there was a scene earlier on in the movie with the kids at like a diner or something, like showing them just hanging out to get to know them better. And Stan nixed it and said,
well, Dino De Laurentiis nixed it.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. Stan tried to fight for it, and De Laurentiis was adamant that scene did not need to be there, that it was superfluous. And Stan and Dino De Laurentiis got in a screaming match over this. Whoa. And which is not in Stan Winston's like nature at all. By all accounts, he's a very like meek, fun-loving, like really nice dude. But De Laurentiis was like adamant about taking this scene out, and in that particular case, Dino won the argument, and they took it out.
Well, and he's right, because I mean, even in the commentary track, they're talking about that, you know, that makes it about, it's more about these kids and really their side characters in this. This is more about Harley. So he, you know, hit him and his journey through this whole thing. So, but yeah, even those fake teeth, just for the record, like he didn't want, you know, he wasn't trying to do like a caricature. He was very clear about that. He was trying to make it like natural, but like, this is a rural Southern guy who hasn't visited a dentist, you know?
Right. Well, and you mentioned that opening scene, Gary, that the guy who's trying to get in the house, who's screaming to get in to his like father, to Ed Harley's father's house, and they won't let him in. That is Dick Warlock.
Oh, I'm somewhat of a Dick Warlock myself.
If anyone doesn't know, Dick Warlock is we've mentioned him on the show before, but he's a very, like, I'd say as famous as a stuntman can be, but a legendary stuntman. He's been Michael Myers multiple times. Like, just look up Dick Warlock. Not to mention that he does have the best name on the planet.
Yeah, he's got an amazing name, and he was apparently working on Aliens at the same, like right before this with these guys. He was in they did that the thing you were talking about with the trash bag stuff. They had to do that with the Queen. He was apparently in the Queen.
Oh, he was. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that when we talked about Aliens, about them doing that trash bag test on that as well. But I did not know that Dick Warlock was the.
They were saying that on the commentary that's cool. That he was just buddies with Winston, and they had him, like in the Alien Queen, it was like Dick Warlock and another guy, and they were just like hanging by a crane with like two long limbs, like swinging them around and stuff. And also, to connect into the next series, he's also apparently one of the guys on the balcony in Spider-Man. I didn't know that.
Oh.
When Green Goblin attacks that balcony.
Really?
But so Dick Warlock all over the place.
Yeah. So getting into the rest of the cast, we've got Joel, who's the dickhead who runs over the kid on his dirt bike. He was played by an actor named John D'Aquino, who's probably best known for his role as Lieutenant Benjamin Krieg on Sequest DSV, which I was a big fan of as a kid. Chris was played by Jeff East. Jeff East had Chris. If the name doesn't ring a bell, he's kind of the hero guy, the guy with the kind of curly hair, who gets into it with Joel. Well, Jeff East, who played him, had played Huckleberry Finn in the 70s. In those 1970s Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn movies. Those were the movies that, like, when you had a substitute teacher at school, they would roll the TV in and play those movies. He also played the teenage Clark Kent in Richard Donner's Superman, the original Superman, in the Clark Kent scenes.
They dubbed his lines. They dubbed his lines with Chris Reeves.
Christopher Reeve's voice. But it is him playing him on screen. He didn't know they were going to dub his lines in that, by the way, until he didn't know until he saw the movie that they had dubbed him.
It's so pissed.
I know. Newcomer Carrie Remsen plays Maggie. She had previously had a small role in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, but not very much else. Kimberly Ross plays Kim. Joel Hoffman is Steve, or Scratch, I think is what his brother calls him. And then the great Buck Flower plays Mr. Wallace. So I
know you want to talk about Buck. I have to say Joel is in Slumber Party Massacre 2. If nobody's seen that,
of course I've seen that. Is he the killer?
No. He's one of the. He plays a dumb surfer sounding guy who's like, "Whoa, let's check out these girls naked," and he's like one of the two guys that are like trying to peek through the windows before they get murdered.
Part 2 is the one where the guy has the drill guitar.
I was gonna say before they all get murdered by the driller killer. Okay, has an electric guitar that's never plugged in. It's just
that movie's incredible, by the way. Slumber Party Master 2 is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to talk about Buck Flower because I don't know that we've had a chance to talk about him on the show yet. He may have showed up in something we talked about. I can't remember though, but he's this guy who he shows up in a lot of stuff. George Buck Flower. Sometimes he's credited under different names, especially in some of his early work. But he's one of my favorite character actors from the 70s and 80s. He started his career in movies with names like Satan's Lust, Below the Belt, and The Dirty Dolls. Pretty sure a lot of these films are porn, some hardcore, some softcore. There's
Don't act like you're not sure.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen them. Listen, if I could track them down, I would. But all I know is that when I looked him up on Letterboxd, some of the covers to these movies are pixelated, so they're censored. So there's a reason for that. There's a movie called Mother Knows Best that he's in, where he plays a character named Boris Clitoris.
Well,
and he's also in another one of his early films is called Succula, which I can only imagine is some sort of porn riff on Dracula.
Boris Clitoris was Todd's screen name on AOL Instant Messenger. Just in case you didn't know.
Oh man, where was I? All right, so Buck Flower, he's in a ton of genre and grindhouse stuff over the years. He's in stuff like Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS and its sequel. He's in The Witch Who Came In From the Sea, where I think he was also like a casting director on that one, in addition to being in it. He played a lot of bums, a lot of hobos. I
was gonna say, like, usually he's a bum or a drunk, something. You know?
Just because of his look, I guess. And his gruff kind of voice. But he's very charismatic, I think. This is why I like seeing him on screen. He's always recognizable. He's got a very distinct voice and speaking pattern. I just really like watching this guy on screen. A lot of folks probably know him best for his appearances in John Carpenter movies over the years. He was in The Fog. He plays Tom. His character's name, I think, is Tommy Wallace. In The Fog, he's like the first one to get killed by the ghost. He's in Starman. He's in They Live. Remember, he's the bum who becomes like rich because he's obeying he's doing what the aliens want him to do. He's in Escape from New York. He's also in Maniac Cop. He's in Mac and Me. He's in Puppet Master 2. He's even in the Back to the Future movies. He's Red the Bum in Back to the Future 1 and 2.
Guy.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So an absolute legend. This is the first time we've really seen him in a movie that we've talked about here. So I wanted to take the opportunity to sing his praises, because I love Buck Flower. Anytime I see him pop up in a movie, I'm excited to see him. I had forgotten that he was in this movie, so when he shows up as Mr. Wallace in this, and it's a fairly significant role, I was pretty excited to see him there.
Watch where you're going, drunk pedestrian.
She can't help him. All she can do is carry you straight to hell.
That's good.
Buck, he's so good. He's so committed. Because like, who else would make that line work? But I love that line.
Yeah, movie. He is great. Despite his extensive resume, I don't think he ever appeared in a Star Trek movie or series. I could be wrong. There's a lot of stuff on his IMDb that I might have skipped over.
Wait a second. I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention, you didn't at all say anything, and these people might show up in Star Trek. I don't know, Todd. I'm sorry, but we didn't mention that Mayim Bialik is one of whatever her name is.
She plays one of George Buck Flower's kids. One of the Wallace kids.
Blossom. And Big Bang Theory
and Jeopardy now.
Yeah. But also the dog, his name is Mushroom in real life. Joe Dante and Steven Spielberg are both claimed as one of the finest actors they've ever worked with. The same dog from Gremlins.
Is it?
Yeah. So,
Mushroom. Good. Mushroom is a great name for a dog.
That is a great name.
So just going to give some love to those fine actors.
I don't know if Mushroom was ever in Star Trek. That's just the dog that Spock is holding.
I was about to say that too. Like, maybe it was.
Say that's like one of two famous dogs in Star Trek. But no, we mentioned Mayim Bialik as one of the Wallace kids. The only other person in this cast that has appeared in Star Trek is the other Wallace kid, Jandy Swanson, who appeared in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, season 1, episode 17, When the Bow Breaks. That was from 1988. She played the role of Katie. And this is of note that this episode was the only episode directed by the late Kim Manners. Some of his credits are Charlie's Angels, Mission Impossible, Baywatch, 21 Jump Street, and here's the connection to our next series, The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., The Commish, Manus, X-Files, and Supernatural, just to name a few. Nice. And that's everybody in Star Trek.
One person.
Yep.
One person, but hey, we had plenty during the James Cameron series, so
that's all right.
Well, a lot of the focus on this film is going to be deservedly on the creature effects guys. There are a couple of other behind the scenes folks who I wanted to mention because I think their work is highly important to this film. The first of those is the film's cinematographer, Bojan Bazeli. His was not a name that rang a bell with me, admittedly. It's a strange name, so I feel like I would remember it had I come across it before. But his filmography is pretty impressive. In recent years, he's worked with directors like Gore Verbinski on The Ring and A Cure for Wellness, David Lowery on Pete's Dragon, the live-action Pete's Dragon remake, which is a gorgeous-looking movie. He's worked with Abel Ferreira a couple of times on Body Snatchers and King of New York. But when he made Pumpkinhead, he was relatively unknown. Of course, Stan Winston knew plenty of A-list cinematographers because of his work with directors like James Cameron and John Carpenter. He probably has old Dean Cundy on.
I was about to say
dial.
That son of a bitch.
But Pumpkinhead had a $3 million budget, so they couldn't afford those A-list guys, right? So Winston and his producers, they went about finding a cinematographer the old-fashioned way by watching a bunch of show reels. One of those reels was from Bojan Bazelli, and they were impressed enough with his work to hire him. And I think Bazelli's work on this film gives it a truly otherworldly look. I really like the cinematography on this movie. It looks like a dark fairy tale, especially in the scenes like in the witch's house. I love the way it's lit with these like red hues and everything, and also in the pumpkin patch where Harley resurrects the demon, and that light coming out of the woods and the fog and everything. I just think it looks really cool. The other person who contributes to that look, especially in those scenes, the witch's house and the pumpkin patch, really the whole film, but those are kind of the standouts, is production designer Cynthia Charette. She was also very early in her career at this point, but her work really goes a long ways towards what makes Pumpkinhead feel very unique as an 80s horror film, because Pumpkinhead does not feel like a product of its time, I don't think. If you compare it to other horror films that are being made around the late 80s, this does not feel, this feels like it's on another level than a lot of those movies.
They 100% mention a lot that they were going for Winston and the other guys, Mario Bava. Like they love those horror movies, like Black Sunday, Black Sabbath.
Yeah, I see that
with the dark fairy tale type stuff they're doing, the fog and the look of the way the light. And they said this was even in the script, the way they wanted this thing lit. So but I think the lighting is such a cool part of this movie, and they even talk about like how they even wrote into the script to have like a psychic disturbance when Pumpkinhead shows up. The way the way the lighting goes crazy and stuff like that. And
I like that.
Strobes and all that. I also heard this on the commentary track. Do you know why cinematographers don't smoke cigarettes?
No, tell me.
Because it take them 3 hours to light it.
That's a good cinematography joke.
That was out there. Good old fashioned cinematography humor.
Well, this film was shot almost entirely in the Topanga Canyon area, just outside of Los Angeles, despite it being set in Appalachia, I guess. I don't really know. I think that's where it's supposed to be set. Definitely.
It is real weird because it's like in the desert and then it's in a swamp.
Right. Like, where are we? By all accounts, it was a very smooth shoot. Winston brought the same fun sense of humor and lighthearted spirit to directing as he had to his creature effects work. Everyone really, when you listen to people talk about this movie, everyone recalls their time making Pumpkinhead fondly. Everyone had a great time. It was fun. It was a lighthearted set despite the dark subject matter. It just seemed to be an overall pretty smooth shoot. Not a lot of hiccups, so not a lot of fun stories of us talking about. We went through enough of that on Titanic, I think, to last us for a while.
The big thing you'll hear from like most of the people involved in it is that nobody, even some of the newer people that came on, they'll like say that like you didn't really appreciate how great this whole process was until you get onto another movie that's shit later.
Yeah, right.
And they're like that everybody was just on the same page. Everybody flowed naturally, knew what everybody's job was. That everybody describes it as like just fantastic, and that everybody intended and had set out to make something super special. That they all really believed in Pumpkinhead working. Yeah. Some of the just real quick other little fun facts I thought were the cabin that the kids are staying at. That's the cabin from Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Where Corey Feldman's
that's
family
number 4, right?
Yeah, number 4. Alec Gillis says who for some reason gets no love on IMDb for Pumpkinhead. Like, I don't know. He was apparently involved in a lot of this, and but he said we were the first to kill Jason right in that living room. And that same cabin, by the way, also used in the Schwarzenegger movie Eraser. It's used in Friday the 13th 7. It's in Parks and Rec. It's where they go on their like team building exercises.
Nice.
Oh yeah,
really. It's at 1801 North Topanga Canyon Boulevard. If anybody's interested, it's called Kelly Gulch. tried to look it up. It's worth about like $3 million.
Oh, well, we're not going to buy it, but we'll go visit.
If you want to go try to buy it,
that's about how much we make on this podcast.
Oh, there's that joke. I love
Roughly.
that joke.
Yeah.
The swap location at the Indian dudes around, they said they're all of that was filmed in the same place where they filmed the Treehouse stuff for Monster Squad.
Nice.
Everybody knows that. Just
another Stan Winston project.
Yeah, I guess he's got his spots he likes.
Yeah.
So there were no stories about Maya Bialik being a raging bitch on the stage? No,
she looked like she was like 7. So
Well, it was after the film was completed that the trouble began. Unbeknownst to Winston, when he signed on, the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group was in the process of going out of business. By August of 1987, DEG was $16.5 million in debt. This is just a cycle that Dino De Laurentiis goes through. He starts a production company, it goes bankrupt, and then he sells everything off and starts a new one. And it's just what he does. It's just what he does.
What really sucked here is that the posters were like already out in the theaters. They said they were
said that it was going to come out in like October of 88,
it was except for at 80. They said at 87 Halloween release is what 87. They were going. Yeah. And of course now all of that's canceled and it'd be like in limbo for forever.
Yeah. So what happens is DEG ends up going bankrupt, and they sold the film eventually after a lengthy process. The film just kind of sat there for a while, and then eventually got sold to United Artists, MGM United Artists. United Artists didn't really seem to know what to do with it. They barely promoted the film at all. And the movie's box office suffered as a result. You see, the same year, this is 1988 by this time, UA's big horror movie for 1988 was Child's Play. And they put most of their focus on promoting that film. They even showed Pumpkinhead as a double feature with Child's Play in a lot of markets for a while. So like Child's Play would be the A, movie, and then Pumpkinhead would be the B movie, which seems like a very strange double feature as well. They don't really, I can't imagine watching Pumpkinhead after watching Child's Play.
It would not feel, that doesn't feel right at all. If you're wondering what UA was doing this whole time, apparently they had a real problem with the name when they came in.
Pumpkinhead.
They did not like Pumpkinhead. That is not going to work. So they had a bunch of names that they were going through. Vengeance the Demon was one of the many titles that got pretty far.
That's terrible.
Demon's Revenge was another.
That's generic.
They said the writer said they remember sitting next to Stan Winston or like talking to him, and him being like, well, they're getting further along, kids. He's like, we're down to Vengeance the Demon or the Demon Vengeance. Which do you guys like better? And it was just all ironic since Pumpkinhead was what got the movie made in the first place.
Right. That name is kind of where it started.
Yeah. And they couldn't, it's finally, I guess they couldn't settle on anything. They just wanted to get it off their plate, I guess.
Just fuck it, it's Pumpkinhead.
But they said the big thing was like, they had good buzz going into the Halloween season. And then it was like, he said that.
Yeah. They were in like Fangoria and all this stuff. People were aware of it. Like, horror fans were aware of it.
Yeah, and it said that the rep it got then was like, oh, it must have sucked. Like they just dropped it.
Well, when you've got posters for a movie that say it's going to come out in October of 1987, and then it doesn't, and it gets pushed back, and you don't know when it's coming out, that usually indicates that there's something wrong with the movie, that they're having to re-edit it or do reshoots. In this case, it was out of the filmmaker's hands, and it was all bureaucracy. And this has happened to plenty of other movies when studios or production companies go bankrupt, or there's a merger, like when Disney and Fox merged and things like that.
Oh yeah.
But the average Joe Schmo moviegoer doesn't know that, so they just think, oh man, this movie, they said it was going to come out in October. Now it's coming out like in March of next year. And it must be really bad. So it kind of kills your momentum.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, as a result, the film only made $4 million at the domestic box office on a $3 million budget. That $3 million doesn't include marketing, which I don't think the marketing budget was very big because they barely marketed it, but there was some marketing budget. Reviews were pretty mixed as well. A lot of critics applauded the film's creature effects and Henriksen's performance, but there wasn't much praise for much else in the movie. But luckily, people have progressed, and reviews. I'm sure that every review of this movie on the internet now in the year of 2022 is pretty positive.
Yeah, it's weird. Like you look online and you can't find any reviews below 5 stars. So I got to give it that. No, I'm just kidding. There's plenty of people that need a nap. For what it's worth, before I go into somebody needs a nap, I did see, I meant to mention this earlier, but apparently it did release for a second overseas finally as Vengeance the Demon.
Oh, did it?
And and there's a trading card company called Frightflix from the 80s that put out these cards. Yeah.
I've got a few of those.
Yeah, it says if you find the Pumpkinhead ones, I mean, that there are some released that have that on there.
Really?
Vengeance the Demon with old Pumpkinhead in the card.
Nice.
But anyway, let's start here with a PR guy. It's you give it 1 out of 5 stars here. It says a waste of time, worth a 0. That's the subject here. Granted, I'm a horror flick fanatic, but Pumpkinhead is no horror flick. It's frivolous, boring, mindless, junk-filled, silly, and stupid. Concoction of guavo, manure, stale dog food, and buzzless warm beer, all brewed into one totally useless 6 cinema sampler suited for oblivion. And that's the best thing I can say about it. Case closed. Carve this pumpkin till death do you part. A total 0. The box, you ask? I've removed it from my collection. Remember, 1 bad apple. I'm not even sure what the last.
What does that even mean? What the box? What does that mean? What box?
Yeah.
Like the DVD came in or something?
I suppose that's what he means. I don't know. This person said 1 out of 5. This movie is really old looking.
That's the whole review.
That's the review.
Okay.
Let's see. Apino ape. I don't know. Anyway, gives it 1 star. My number 1 reference when I tell someone who the worst horror movie monster is. I looked this movie up so I could applaud all the others who watched it and thought the same as myself. Then I saw a 3-star average. This crappy movie is some of the worst mess I've ever seen. There are some bad horror movies out there, but Pumpkinhead takes the cake. A cult following? Yeah, you'd have to be in a cult to think that this movie was good. You can it got me too.
That's good.
You could never really see the creature because the filmmakers made sure to put it in mostly dim scenes. Why? So you couldn't see how terrible the Pumpkinhead costume is. I know, I saw wires. I can't believe there are sequels. Ooh, I really hate this movie. LOL.
They think this is the worst movie monster of all time.
Yeah.
Like more so than like the trolls from Troll 2. Like there's a lot more bad movie monsters that would rank above this one.
I didn't even read all of Jesse Gehrig's review here because I just started off and like in the first 2 lines, I was like, well, I'm using this, whatever it says from here. And it's from May of last year, 1 star. This movie is about pumpkins because pumpkins are seasonal. Pumpkin Man is a movie about a group of teenagers played by actors well into their 20s and 30s. These middle-aged young people on dirt bikes, man, and they are tearing around on those dirt bikes, man, riding up hills and over smaller hills, dirt bikes. Then some stuff happens, and the characters all have different reactions to the stuff that happens. Next thing I know, the movie is over, and several members of the G.I. Joe team are there to talk about what the moral of the story was, or they tell me how to deal with a nosebleed. I don't know. The G.I. Joes are kind of pushy, so I usually zone them out.
What are you talking about?
I don't know.
That guy was stoned when he watched the movie and when he wrote that review.
Yeah, probably.
His review for Pumpkin Man.
Yeah.
Justin, when you put out the card for this, please put Pumpkin Man, but cross out man and put like a right head next to it.
Good old Pumpkin Man.
Here is Grant from Savages. 1 star. If I had $1 for every time a classic was actually just a dog shit film with good lighting, I could produce a movie. Suit's fine, but just if a xenomorph fucked a pumpkin, nothing revolutionary. Jude gives it 1 star and says, more like Blumpkinhead. And then Drew says 1 star, more like Pumpkin Bed, because this movie will put you to sleep.
Wow. So clever.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
clever.
Yeah.
Here's Jordan with the final review for today saying 1 star, I well and truly can fucking not understand how this is a cult classic. Too self-serious to laugh at, too campy to give any legit scares, no tension, and a really unimpressive score contribute to this. And none of the characters are likable, so you don't mind seeing them slaughtered by the Kmart xenomorph. Stay away.
Well, Todd, I know that, first of all, Gary, I know that you are a big fan of this movie. So we'll get to your thoughts on it in a second. But Todd, this was your first viewing of Pumpkinhead, right?
It was, yes.
So I want to hear Todd's take, because we didn't do a preview to this really in our last bonus episode because we just announced it and figured out what we were going to watch in that last bonus episode. So we didn't really get to talk about it beforehand. But what did you think on your first time viewing of Pumpkinhead?
It struck me as just kind of, it's just a fun horror movie. They're not trying to, make the next big shocking culture altering thing. They're making a fun movie for audiences. I think it comes into the popcorn category. I can see some people, you heard some people comparing Pumpkinhead, the creature, to the xenomorph. I'll admit, when I first saw it on screen, I was just like, it looks a lot like the xenomorph, but understandable, with, Stan's company kind of behind it. Yeah, there might be some similarities there. But like I said, Lance Henriksen just swinging for the fences, and it was just fun. I really enjoyed it.
Gary, why do you like this movie so much? I mean, did you watch this when you were a kid? I know me and you both have a big background as we watched a lot of horror movies when we were kids, especially middle school, high school age. Is this one of those that you discovered back then?
Yeah, definitely. This is one I've watched.
This is like a video store thing for me. I just saw it on the shelf of the video store. Pumpkinhead, that sounds cool. Had a picture of a claw coming down, and it caught my attention. So that's where I first saw it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I just I think the movie is better than it should be. I think Todd's right that they're not sweet. They're not setting out to make some kind of piece of classic cinema. They're I don't know. They're making a monster movie. That's exactly.
They're making a monster movie that has a little bit. It does have something to say.
For sure. I just mean, I don't think that they're trying to reach beyond what their area is here.
They're not rewriting the genre or anything.
And
right.
And I say that to say that I think they overachieve with that. They make you got Stan Winston, and obviously you expect the creature to look cool. I think Pumpkinhead is a cool fucking creature. Yeah. And I get the xenomorph comparisons. It makes sense. But also I think Pumpkinhead's kind of distinct from a xenomorph.
I think so too. I think those comparisons come just from the basic shape of the body and the way it moves, but other than that, that's kind of where the similarities end. But anytime you have a guy in a suit, they're going to be somewhat shaped the same,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think especially for a time the more I watch it now, knowing the stuff I know or having seen all the movies I've seen, I really appreciate that when you're talking about a period, which is the golden age of horror, of the 80s and 80 to 90. When you got a movie like this that's coming right off of slashers dying off and everything's all about excess and craziness, it's cool to see especially a guy like Stan Winston who can do so much and knows so much about how to make effects, and chooses to say but how can we make, we've only got so much of a budget, let's pull back Like, let's leave a lot to the imagination. Let's play with this. Like, it's, you know, the people complaining about Pumpkinhead not showing up really for forever. I mean, that's part of the intrigue to me. Like, it's like, it's fun. It doesn't overuse Pumpkinhead. And when it does show Pumpkinhead, you get glimpses of it when you need to. And then it's more, you know, and even then at first it builds to it. It shows you like parts of him, you know, or he's like briefly. One of my favorite.
I felt the people who complain about that are the same ones who are going to complain about the shark not showing up early enough in Jaws.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I was actually just thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you get just enough of him to know that he's something crazy and you don't know, and you get to let your imagination have fun with it, which is something a guy like Stan Winston wouldn't have to do, but chooses to do that. He understands the value of that kind of thing. It's not overblown, and it's not, I don't know. I just think it's well cast, directed, planned, acted. Like you get to see, I don't know, you get to see like a guy like Stan Winston, who we've talked about a little bit in this one, use all of the shit that he knows. And and it's, I just really appreciate it. Like how dramatically effective it is. And then also just effective it is as a monster movie. And I don't know, it's just like, and there's fun things you could pick apart. Dude, one of the best parts this time was watching the commentary track, because you get to hear what's his face in the Pumpkinhead suit. He points out every time they fucked up. Like legitimately, there's a time where like Pumpkin, like the girl shoots Lance Henriksen and Pumpkinhead falls face first on the ground, but ends up grabbing the dude's foot and standing up with him hanging upside down. He points it out that like you literally, if you look quick enough, it pans up and Pumpkinhead's wearing like blue Nike sneakers. But it's just, I don't know.
There's another moment he talks about where Pumpkinhead, where they were doing the wire thing, but they didn't have like a huge harness. It was like one wire. So Pumpkinhead's coming down this hill. He's like backlit. You see his full body coming down, and he's kind of walking a little bit crooked. Tom Woodruff describes it as his like John Wayne walk, where he's kind of walking with that, like one shoulder. And it wasn't like that wasn't like a performance decision he made. It was because of the way the harness was attached to him that he just kind of like got stuck in that position going down the hill. And when they were wearing that harness, he's got like a wire mesh thing underneath the suit, but they didn't have any padding on it because it would have made the suit look too bulky. So this stuff's just like digging into him. You know? There's another goof up that the kid who plays Bunt, the Wallace kid who shows them where the witch is, you know, where Pumpkinhead burst into like the closet he's hiding in, and he said they got it's like 3-4 in the morning. They're doing night shoots, and the whole crew, Stan, everybody just got the giggles during that scene, including Tom Woodruff, who's in the Pumpkinhead suit. And he said they could not get a take where they were not like giggling. And if you watch the scene close enough, you can see like they obviously they dubbed over the sound and stuff, so you hear Pumpkinhead kind of roar when it comes in. But if you look at Bunt, he is like laughing his ass off during that scene.
It's so there's like, you can tell they're just having a good time making this movie. Another one, just as we're talking about him, is in the church scene. Like when he first steps in the doorway, he's like, I think he's here now, and it pans, and they do such a good job, by the way, of like, again, like, you know, just like on that church scene, they're shooting like outside of the church, like through the boards and stuff, so it's kind of cool. But if you look hard enough, like when Pumpkinhead's standing in the doorway, he's definitely standing on apple cart or apple boxes, like in the doorway, to make himself taller. And so like I love that stuff, but at the same time, that scene, by the way, with that backlighting, and I mentioned the thing and stuff like that, and the guy in the Pumpkinhead suit, I just forgot his name, but when he's
Tom Woodruff,
Woodruff, when he's walking, watch his movements next time you see it, and he's going for, he said straight up Harryhausen, like he's trying to move a little like a Harryhausen thing.
like he's stop motion,
he's stop motion, just as a callback to like those kind of monster movies. He was trying to harness that. And the person who got that, who saw like a screener, like stopped by and watched some of it on the dailies with Winston, it said, that's fucking cool. That guy was James Cameron.
When they did their initial screening at the studio, where they were screening the movie for everyone for the first time to see the edited product. Winston invited James Cameron to that screening. He kind of wanted to show off his creation to his friend, who was a acclaimed director at this point, just kind of like, look what I did, kind of thing.
They said Gillis and them said they were sitting in the seats like watching it, and the part where it pans back, or like Pumpkinhead turns around and it's got Henriksen's face on it. They said the row in front of them, somebody goes, fucking cool.
It is fucking cool.
And they looked up and it was Dan O'Bannon.
Nice. I love that. I love that. That's great.
But there's just like lots of cool little things like that. Like I just love like how into it everybody was, and there's a moral, there's like a simple story in a world where at the time, especially in the 80s, where it could have been a slasher, it could have been overblown with gore. It could have been about the sex crazed teenagers like boning in the cabin, and I'm not against that. But instead, this is about a middle-aged dad whose son dies, and it becomes like this weird, spooky fairy tale that, as weird as it is, even could be like a father-son horror movie, like the first horror movie you showed to your kid, almost in a way. And I don't know, I just love it. I just think it's perfectly done for what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I don't think Pumpkinhead is like this untouchable classic. I think I love this movie. It did eventually gain a cult following once it was released on video, and I think it deserves its status as a cult classic. It would deserve its status as a cult classic if only because it's the directorial debut of one of the greatest special effects artists in the history of movies, but also because I think that concept, that demon of revenge, is a really great concept. It's a really unique concept, and the creature itself is, of course, an incredible piece of art.
I'm not opposed to them rebooting the whole thing entirely. Just I do think the design is, you should stick with that.
Yeah, but I just think this movie would be worth watching, even if all it had going for it was, hey, this is Stan Winston's directorial debut. Hey, it's got a really cool Stan Winston creature. But luckily, there's a lot of other good stuff here as well, in addition to just those things. Like we've mentioned it a couple of times, but I love this like dark, grim fairy tale like feel of the movie. It's like a Southern Gothic fairy tale, even if it does kind of treat Southern people with a little bit of disdain, like we all live in shanties with no phone or running
just
water,
real dirty,
just all covered in dirt all the time. But I think that
you say that, but then don't pretend like we don't know people exactly like this.
They're around. They're all in Greer. They're out.
Wait a minute, my address is in Greer.
My dad lives in Greer.
But I think that they are almost caricatures, even though they're not played that way by like Lance Henriksen and Buck Flower. But I think the reason that they're sort of almost like a comic book version of what a Southern person is supposed to look like, I think that's because this film has the look and the feel of an old EC Comics story.
Oh, very.
Like it very much feels like an old EC comic story. You've got all these reds and oranges, deep blue blacks, lots of fog, the kind of stuff you would see in one of those old Vault of Horror stories. You've got blood rituals performed by candlelight, creepy old hags. This is like classic horror comics territory.
I was going to say it feels like the only setting where this kind of story works. Like it really feels like it suits this. Because even the kids that show up, not to cut you off of this whole thing, but I was even noticing that the kids that show up, their clothing is not even that crazy. Like you can tell it's the 80s, but it's like the worst fashion faux pas is probably like the kids wearing a headband at one point. But if you catch some early episode video of some of our stuff, I was wearing headbands.
But I think Winston made the right call in making this sort of a heightened reality. A little bit that comic book pulp, because this is very much pulp territory. And like a lot of those EC comics, Pumpkinhead is kind of a cautionary tale. The idea that vengeance dooms not just the victim, but the one doling out the punishment. In this case,
dig two graves. Two graves.
Exactly. And that's the kind of stuff you would see in those old EC comics. And the concept of that revenge demon kind of links Pumpkinhead back to like folk tales about deals with the devil, Faust and things like that. None of which ever went well for the one making the deal, as things don't go particularly well for Ed Harley at the end of the movie.
Well, you mentioned Faust. Faust is 100% one of the things they talk about on top of the Lovecraft and the other stuff. They mentioned Faust like 100 times in that commentary track. They definitely knew what they were doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Ed Harley, we've talked about Lance Henriksen. We've praised him, but I don't think he's ever been better than he is here. He plays it. He gets a little hokey towards the end when he's like pleading with the witch to stop Pumpkinhead. His Southern accent's a little over the top, but overall he's pretty incredible. Especially, I love those early scenes where he's interacting with his son. You really like feel the bond with them. You know, like the scene where he's washing his son's hands, that was ad-libbed by Lance Henriksen. Like that was a story from his own life with his own grandmother, where he talks about her washing his hands. Like Lance Henriksen ad-libbed that on the day of the shoot. But I think that you have to really build that relationship between him and his son, because his son's not going to be around for the whole movie, and that's what drives the plot. So it makes it that much more heartbreaking when the kid dies. And then that scene where he pulls up and he sees his son lying in the field, like that is a hell of a performance for a low budget horror movie. Like he is, like you said, Todd, he is not dialing it in, or he's not phoning it in. Like he is there. He is treating this like it's the biggest movie ever made. And then later, like the look that he gives the kid, a scratch that's still there. The kid later describes it as like, he looks like he wanted to kill me. The look on Henriksen's face when he jerks his head around and looks at them, he's shooting daggers with his eyes, man. Like, and
the score just complements it perfectly. Yeah,
like you really believe that he would kill that guy if his kid's life wasn't his number one priority. Right. And then his kid lives for a few more minutes, which makes his death all the more heartbreaking, because there's like a chance that he's going to make it. Yeah. And that makes you understand why he makes his deal with the devil.
But even then, too, don't forget the kid, like. He sees the spirit of his kid coming back for just that one moment in the truck too, where it's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And just where he's like, his conscience is, Lance Henriksen approached this as like, this may be my only starring role ever. Like you could tell, like, he's like, this is my movie now.
This is it.
I love it. Like, I think he is all in on making this work. And I respect that.
Yeah, and that lead up, that whole thing is very important to the film. It adds more gravitas to the film. I do understand some people's complaints that it takes a little bit too long before Pumpkinhead starts his rampage. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I do like all that stuff. I think once Pumpkinhead, the reason that I think that he takes a little bit too long to start on his rampage is because once Pumpkinhead starts killing, Ed Harley seems to regret what he's done almost immediately. Yeah. I think the film could have been a little bit stronger if he had gradually come to that conclusion. Like if Pumpkinhead had started killing earlier and there was a progression of Ed Harley realizing, oh, fuck, what have I unleashed? What have I done? Instead of kind of immediately after the killing begins. Like as soon as Pumpkinhead makes his first kill, and then within 5 minutes of screen time, Ed Harley's like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Well, how about also like he could have killed, in this one, this did cross my mind, is like the last person Pumpkinhead actually kills is the person who killed the kid, know? And it's like, I don't know if that's right, or if you go with like, he gets rid of that person, but then he keeps coming. Because he's killing this whole group, and
he's
then
killing all of them.
And then like Ed Harley's like, wait, fuck. Like, hold on.
But Joel is the one that you kind of hate the most. They make you hate him the most, so he's the one that you get the most satisfaction out of Pumpkinhead killing. You're kind of on Pumpkinhead's side.
Speaking of, again, I said this before a little bit, but some of my favorite shit in this last time watching it was just, he's so. I don't know. Pumpkinhead has so much life to him about how he's going about this. Like he's enjoying it. It's not just that when you call Pumpkinhead, he's killing them. He's tormenting them.
Yeah.
Like, and it didn't really hit me until watching it this last time that like, just like when they're like in the cabin discussing things, they've seen the kid Joel die or whatever. And they're like all freaked out in the cabin. And there's a moment where the lightning flashes. You can see like, they're like arguing about what to do, and Pumpkinhead just like strolls by,
by the window. Yeah.
It honestly made me think of Jurassic Park. That scene, it felt like a raptor walking by, like a predator walking by.
There's a scene with the girl. Well, first, sorry, I'm going crazy now. First, they do mention Jurassic Park in the commentary as well. They're like talking about that. That's Winston talked a little bit about that later on. That they were saying he, when he was thinking about this, he's like, when we were thinking about how to shoot Pumpkinhead, he was like, it's like you either get Jurassic Park or you get a horror movie. And he's like, and there's times in like Jurassic Park, he's like, you want to show what you can do, and there's awe. And it's like outside in the environment, you can see the dinosaurs. He's like, but we're dealing mostly with fear. And he's like, so that's up close and too close to really ever understand what you're seeing. I don't know. It was just an interesting comparison I never thought about before, but it was from like a later interview or something that Winston had mentioned that. But Pumpkinhead, like, there's the scene, another great line from it that wouldn't work anywhere else is where like the girl's like going to get a knife or something. And the one girl's like, oh, the only person that can help us now is God. And she's like, grabs the knife and is like, well, just in case God doesn't show up.
That's good.
But like, I love that line. But then later, like they're huddled up in the corner and she looks up and the knife is sitting up on the counter. And it's like, you think she's looking at the knife, but then it pans up further. And what she's really looking at is Pumpkinhead has her friend's head like outside the window, like just bouncing it up and down.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. I'm just like, it took me forever to get that. Then I'm just like, he's fucking with them.
Yeah.
Like, he is just like waving her friend's head.
Yeah. It's like what Michael Myers does.
The friend who's talking about God, like she ends up getting a cross carved into her face.
Yeah. And this could have definitely been structured more like a slasher movie. Like if they had started the killings earlier, Pumpkinhead taking out the kids one by one, with Ed eventually realizing the magnitude of what he's unleashed. They were kind of very adamant about not making this a slasher movie, though. But once Ed realizes it does set up a really fun third act. Ed kind of flip-flops into becoming the protector of the people that he wanted to kill, to a point where he sacrifices himself in order to save those that are still alive, and I think it helps that the film treats its characters like real people, which a lot of horror movies of this time don't really do. Even side characters like Buck Flowers' character or the kids, the Buck Flowers kids, the Wallace kids, and the son Bunt, who shows Ed Hurley where to find the witch. They're not treated like just plot devices. They're treated like actual people. Like, you feel like this world that Pumpkinhead takes place in, this rural area, has a life of its own, and we're just seeing this chapter of it,
By the way, Stan Winston's kids were also part of those
were
people. Yeah, like they were I think one of his daughters was guiding the hogs when he like pulls into the area. Yeah, like he put his kids as some of those hicks.
Nice.
I mean, even if we're giving a lot of praise to this movie, and I know not everyone's going to agree with that, but even if you do disagree with the praise we're giving the film itself, you can't deny how fucking cool the monster is. I know some of the people in your reviews you read, Gary, were talking shit about the monster, but this monster is an incredible creation. I think it is really cool. I mentioned it before, but I love that little grin that he gets when he makes a kill. Like, he's enjoying it. He is enjoying it. And Winston also wisely doesn't show him too much, so he never loses his his ability to be scary. So when you do see him, he is downright frightening. And he's filmed like almost a mythological being, like the shot of him walking through the crumbling church, like he's shot like he is an otherworldly being. The design is super gnarly. Like, he looks like a diseased organ. I think Pumpkinhead is one of the last great practical movie monsters that was created before CGI started taking center stage.
That's fair. Yeah.
They shoot it too, the way they shoot it, with like a lot of up angles, like at it just makes it feel huge. And like it just I don't know. I just think it does work really, really well. It's unfair to say that the monster's back, because I think that monster is amazing. I love the part 2, by the way, just because now we're just talking about, I'm thinking of all these things in the tree, like where it carries that one girl up into the tree.
Oh yeah,
that's good.
It's just
such a good shot.
Yeah, just drops her, and she's like on the rock at the end. I'm like, fuck, man, this is wild.
It is. He is brutal. Yeah. I think a lot of what makes the monster work is Tom Woodruff's performance. Tom Woodruff Jr., his movements are incredible. We haven't talked about Woodruff a lot on this episode. I mean, a little bit during, when we were talking about the behind the scenes stuff, but not in a lot of detail. But I think that Tom Woodruff is an Oscar-winning special effects supervisor. His first credit as a special effects supervisor was on the Terminator. He was an integral part of Winston's stable over the years, and he deserves a lot of credit as a special effects supervisor, but also a lot of credit as a creature performer as well. This is not his only time in the suit. In addition to Pumpkinhead, he played the Gill Man in the Monster Squad. He played a Graboid in Tremors. He plays a Xenomorph in Alien 3.
Dang.
He's the lead Xenomorph, I think, is his credit. And he played Goro in the 1995 Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh, yeah.
Hey.
So he's got a pretty good resume on that side of things as well. So I want to give a little shout out to him. It's kind of a shame that Pumpkinhead was screwed upon release because of De Laurentiis' company going out of business, because it not getting marketed properly. Because I think that the character deserves a legit franchise instead of the straight to video and straight to sci-fi franchise that it became. Like it deserved a legitimate theatrical run, I think, along with all the other great movie monsters.
I think it got bigger had it had that. To your thing that you were just talking about, though, they describe that effects process as like super. They call it incestuous. Just so people realize, though. Who had the baby version of Pumpkinhead? I was trying to remember.
I can't remember. Alec Gillis, maybe. I can't remember who.
Yeah, maybe it was Alec Gillis. That feels right because I got a lot of quotes from him. But he was saying that like Shane Mahan had the witch. He's like, I had the baby. Alex sculpted the adult version of the head. Or no, so it wasn't him. He's like, we all worked on the body and the face. John Rosengren did the final version with the face. Richard Landon did animatronics, and I was just typing this out as I was listening to the commentary because he said Howard Berger, Greg Nicotero, Bob Kurtzman, they were all actually there with us. Oh, wow. And he said we were all working on this stuff. And he said years later, we started our company. We did Tremors. We rented space from K&B to start our stuff. And they just gave us space to do Tremors because we were all buddies. And they said later they did a movie, Intruder. And like they would help each other out, just be like, just give us some credit at the end, nice. And they would just like all work with each other, just like they all knew each other. They all like would just show up on set and be like, what do you need help with? And
it's one thing that I notice a lot about, especially in special effects around this time. So these guys, they all worked together at some point, then they go off and they start their own thing, but then they help each other out, like Stan Winston coming in to help Rob Bottin on The Thing, like they're all supporting each other. It's like a cool little community. It feels like Tom Savini, hired Greg Nicotero. Nicotero goes and starts his own company, and it's I don't know. I really like that aspect of it.
Well, it's odd, in an industry that's so competitive to find this camaraderie and community. Yeah,
it's really cool. So, of course, it is time for the segment we do on every episode. Further viewing. What do you pair with Pumpkinhead? If we're doing a double feature, Pumpkinhead, what goes well with it? Todd, I'll let you start.
Honestly, I had a...
Don't give us a bullshit answer like you did on Avatar.
No, I actually have a real one this time. So for this one, in looking at the somewhat, because the film does have something to say, but, at face value, it's kind of this, it's a little campy. You've got the trope of the kids and cabin in the woods. You've got, some swinging for the fences from your main character. So I think those are all found in Evil Dead 1981. So there's
never
another.
Seen it.
Yeah. Oh, you never seen it?
No.
It's decent.
Unfamiliar with it.
I'd check it out.
we should work something out where we have to watch that. So
we should. Yeah.
We'll talk about it.
Sure.
How about you, Gary?
The weird thing is with if you want to talk about the creature stuff, like, there's the obvious stuff we've already mentioned like 100 times. I would say that the movie I will give is the one I always associate with it in my brain for some reason. I think it's just because of being a kid. I watched both these movies, and aside from, again, the slashers that were all about, and again, this is no complaining, titties and teen sex in a cabin in the woods and blah 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 blah. I always watched this movie and thought of it as like a weird, spooky fairy tale, just like the movie The Gate. I really loved that movie when I was growing up too, and it feels for some reason similar to me, like just accidentally releasing some kind of demon thing.
Yeah, I can definitely see that,
and regretting it.
Yeah,
and then so
Steven Dorff, or a young Steven Dorff, movie, I think.
Oh, wow.
So I got to go with Pet Sematary.
That makes sense,
because Pet Sematary thematically is like, first of all, it's about the way someone deals with grief, like the death of a child and how they deal with it and what they're willing to do to make it right. In the case of Pet Sematary, it's bringing the kid back. In the case of Pumpkinhead, it's getting revenge on the people who took your kid away from you, and then regretting that decision because of everything that it brings along with it. So I think Pet Sematary, the original, I should specify, Pet Sematary, the Mary Lambert version, would be a great double feature with this. If you want to be real fucking depressed, if you don't have, if you have kids, maybe that's not your best special feature.
If you just want a couple of back-to-back movies about your kids dying, this is the way to go.
That might not be your favorite double feature if you have kids, but I think thematically they work really well together.
I'm gonna stick with The Gate. It was like literally like the year before, and the kids are the heroes. So
not dead.
Maybe you should watch it after Pumpkinhead, and then
all right,
you're like, we lost our kid. Maybe throw in the Monster Squad or something.
Yeah, and, Monster Squad would be a good one. Yeah, just for something fun, some more fun Stan Winston work that's a little less heavy. Let's say. Right. Despite the poor box office performance of Pumpkinhead, the film ended up doing much better on home video, where it finally found an audience and it became a cult favorite. It was so popular on video, in fact, that the rights to the film and its characters were eventually purchased by a third party. The Motion Picture Corporation of America is the name of the company that bought the rights to it. Yeah. A really creative name there. But that was the only way that the producers ended up making any money, because the movie didn't make any money in the box office. That selling off the rights was the only way to kind of make a profit on this. And a straight-to-video sequel called Pumpkinhead 2 Blood Wings was released in 1994, directed by Jeff Burr, who was known for The Stepfather 2, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and Puppet Master 4 and 5. And now, Gary, you've seen Blood Wings.
I've seen Blood Wings, yeah, and I've recently watched Puppet Master 4 and 5. Pumpkin Master.
I'm working my way through Puppet Master, and 4 is my next one to watch, actually. But what do you remember Blood Wings? I don't know how long it's been since you saw it, but I watched it this week. I watched it a couple days ago, and it's very much a direct-to-video 1994 horror movie.
I was going to say, that's the thing I remember about watching it the last time, is that it very much feels like that. It feels exactly like something you would have seen on the Sci-Fi Channel at the time or something.
It's got Lil Moon Fry, is that her name, who played Punky Brewster? She's in it. Linnea Quigley is in it very briefly, just to show some tit and get scared, which is what most people hired her for, I guess, at the time. And it stars as the sheriff in the town. It stars Andrew Robinson. Andrew Robinson played Larry in Hellraiser. I recently watched. I'm working my way through the Child's Play movies for. We've started our Halloween watching already. So I've been watching all the Child's Play movies. He's in part 3, which is the one set in the military school. He's the sergeant who is in charge of shaving the kid's head and enjoying it far too much. But he's also, we should mention, Garrick in Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Oh yeah.
Nice. But so he starts in Pumpkinhead 2. Pumpkinhead 2 is not. I would not seek it out. I sought it out. I had to rent it. I had to pay $4 to rent it, like I was going to Blockbuster or something. But I don't think it's not an integral entry in the Pumpkinhead franchise. In fact, I would say the only Pumpkinhead movie you really need to watch is the first one. Because after Pumpkinhead 2, which is, again, it was 1994, there were 2 additional sequels produced called Pumpkinhead Ashes to Ashes and Pumpkinhead Blood Feud, which were filmed in Romania in 2006, and they were released as sci-fi original movies in October 2006 and February 2007, respectively. They did see the return of Lance Henriksen as Ed Harley.
I'm interested in that.
He's kind of a ghost. He's kind of a ghost who he's not able to move on because he's cursed by what he did by unleashing Pumpkinhead. But he's also like the vessel for Pumpkinhead's return. So the thing about Pumpkinhead 2 is that it kind of ignores the mythology of the first film. Pumpkinhead in Pumpkinhead 2 he has a backstory where he was like this deformed kid who were killed by some bullies in the 50s. And
I was actually going to shit on that.
It's terrible.
Yeah,
it's a terrible rewriting of the Pumpkinhead character.
But the first, so like the first one does imply, because you see the witch carry the body up to and bury it again, and it has the necklace on that the kid gave us. So it's obviously Harley,
right,
that's getting buried. So it does imply that he'll come back.
Well, he does, but that's in Pumpkinhead. That's in 3 and 4. Part 2 ignores that and makes him this kid who got bullied in the 50s, who had like a weird deformity on his head. So it's a really stupid rewriting of the backstory of Pumpkinhead. But Pumpkinhead 3, they use Ed Harley's body as like the vessel to bring him back. It's a very bad movie. The only thing it really has going for it is that the Pumpkinhead costume looks better than it did in part 2. Not nearly as good as in the original. And Doug Bradley is the villain. He plays a like small town doctor / organ harvester. So it's got Pinhead versus Pumpkinhead in it. You've got that going for it.
That I would like to see.
And then Pumpkinhead Blood Feud, the fourth one, is basically a Romeo and Juliet type story.
Oh God!
These two people from they're in two separate families. Boy and a girl, forbidden love. Here's the twist, though: the two separate families, Hatfields and McCoys.
Nice,
like legit Hatfields.
They're the Hatfields and the McCoys. She's
Okay.
a McCoy, he's a Hatfield, or maybe vice versa. I don't remember. And one member from one family kills one of the daughters from the other family. They unleash Pumpkinhead to get revenge and all this stuff. And it is terrible. They both very much feel like a 2006 sci-fi original movie.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like sometimes I want to like just praise sci-fi and say God bless you for doing what you do. I know this is unpopular. This is probably a whole other show, but I'm okay with Sharknado, but then it's just like things get out of hand.
It's to a certain point. I mean, these movies are, if you want to watch them, the third one is actually very hard to find. Ashes to Ashes, like the DVD is going for like $99 on Amazon.
I'm sure that it's ever sold for $99.
Well, pro tip, I found it on YouTube in full with Indonesian subtidals. So that's how I watched it.
There you go.
Remind me, and I'll see if I can get it.
Justin,
We're going to
that's
release
value.
The Curse of the Fly on our YouTube. So if nobody's watching, I'm not opposed for us uploading it.
Pumpkinhead 4 Blood Feud is on Tubi as of this recording, so that one's very easy to find. Why 3 is hard to find and 4 is not, when they were both produced for Sci-Fi at the same time for the same company, I don't know, but that's the way
They
it is.
forgot.
There was also talk of a Pumpkinhead reboot a few years ago, but as far as I know, nothing ever came of it. Although I'm not opposed to a reboot or like a legacy sequel for Pumpkinhead. I'd almost rather see a legacy sequel, one of those like Halloween 2018 that ignores all the other sequels and it's just a 30 some odd years later.
That would be badass. That's what they should do.
I would be
you don't
fine
even
with
have
that.
to stick too much to anything. I mean,
No, Lance
this
Henriksen's
is its
still
own
kicking,
Yeah, it's a
bring him back.
standalone fairy tale that like you can make it connect however you want.
I mean, there's so much you can do with the concept of a revenge demon, which is kind of what they do with the sequels. I mean, they do bring Ed Harley back as a sort of mystical character, but you can do a lot with just the idea of a demon of revenge. There's a lot that's fertile ground for a horror movie franchise.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love Lance and what he did here, I don't even see the point of bringing him back. Like, like his story was told all the way through. But yeah, I found the stuff you're talking about. Like in November of 21, like Bloody Disgusting had a whole thing, an exclusive about Paramount Players. Really, they were already through the script writing and they were heading into production, hoping to announce the director soon. This is November 2021, so like almost a year ago. Yeah, and and then there's like nothing. You can't find anything else about it.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, sometimes when movies are in development, there won't be any news for a long time, maybe a year or two, depending on how things are going. And Stan Winston, after Pumpkinhead, he did direct one other movie. I mean, obviously, he mostly focuses on special effects stuff. He still got, at the time that this movie came out, he's still 5 years away from doing Jurassic Park. So he's still got great stuff ahead of him. He did direct one other movie, though, and it's called A Gnome Named Norm. Norm with a G, like gnome. A gnome named Norm. It came out in 1990, stars Anthony Michael Hall and Jerry Orbach. And Anthony Michael Hall plays a Los Angeles police detective who teams up with a gnome to solve a murder. Unfortunately, I did not have time to watch this week. I wanted to, but I focused on watching all the Pumpkinhead sequels instead. But I do feel like I need to see it.
Alexa, how many Oscars did a gnome named Norm win?
Robert Zadar is in it. Robert Zadar.
The Jaw. Yeah.
Maniac Cop himself.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Anthony Michael Hall, also Tommy Doyle, and recently in Halloween.
And
Kills.
Recent Halloween. Yeah.
But no, was it? He's in Weird Science, right? Yeah.
He's in Weird Science. He's in all those John Hughes movies and stuff.
Oh man.
He's in the Dead Zone TV show.
The wife was watching Weird Science the other day. I would like to discuss with that guy, like especially the part where he gets high and he's hanging out with the black guys in the back of their car and he's just like trying to talk like a brother. I'd love to just see how those conversations went.
Fellas, I guess that's it for Pumpkinhead. I think we've covered about everything that needs to be said about Pumpkinhead.
Yeah, I was going to say just like pop culturally impactful, and the fact that like it was turned into a comic book series. It had
a video game.
Yeah, it had a video game called Blood Wings, Pumpkinhead's Revenge in 95. The comic book series was called Pumpkinhead, The Rites of Exorcism. It was supposed to be 4 issues. It was canceled after 2.
I'm surprised we haven't seen more like comic books with Pumpkinhead like we do Aliens and like RoboCop and Predator, like Pumpkinhead versus Predator, or
And I just copied this paragraph, but it said in 1991, Geometric Design Inc. produced and marketed the first licensed Pumpkinhead model kit. It featured the demon on a display base depicting a portion of a burned out church. The model kit was sculpted by American artist Randy Bowen. The kit was discontinued when Geometric Design released its Pumpkinhead the Metamorphosis kit in 94, sculpted by Japanese artist Takayuki Takaya. The second set was based on the Pumpkinhead sequel story written by Carducci and Girardi and published in the Dark Horse comic series. The kit included a glossy full-color booklet that concluded the canceled comic. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I had the McFarlane movie monster of Pumpkinhead years ago. I don't know what happened to it, but I remember that one being a pretty good sculpt. It was cool.
In 99, the Misfits had their album Famous Monsters, and Pumpkinhead is a song on there all about Pumpkinhead.
Not the best era of Misfits music, in my opinion, but
it's there.
It's there. It exists. It does exist.
Pumpkinhead, just saying, Pumpkinhead obviously touched a lot of people.
Well, that's it for our Pumpkinhead episode. We will be starting a new series on our next episode, but we're not going to tell you what it is yet. We've hinted at it a couple of times if you're paying attention during this episode, but we'll make an official announcement on our next bonus episode, which will be on your podcast feed next week. So you'll have to just tune in for that to know what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
So anyway, are you laughing at Todd? Yeah,
I was.
Well, where can you gentlemen be found on the internet?
I am at This Is Gary Horne on all the social medias. Also, you can follow at NWA, which is my wrestling company. Not really. It's
you work for them.
Yeah, I'm also on at cinema_shock.
You are?
No, not really. I mean, I should be.
We are at cinema_shock on Twitter and Instagram, and we're on Facebook and all that stuff as well. How about you, Mr. Davis?
For more appreciation of special effects, prosthetic wonders, and Trekkie goodness, please check out my show, Computer Resume Podcast. It's a chronological journey through the entire Star Trek franchise for fans new and old. And each week I sit down with a friend, a comedian, an actor, an author, a ne'er-do-well, and discuss a Star Trek story from top to bottom and other things surrounding it. Available wherever you get your podcasts, on all the socials, and Patreon at Computer Resume. And I am at Mr. Todd A. Davis on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and DDD Beyond.
I'm at Justin_Bishop on all the usual places. Again, find us at cinema_shock or at cinemashock.net. Tell your friends, tell your enemies to listen. Until next week,
may the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
Be excellent to each other.
When we get out of here, Johnny's going to be carrying his keys home in a knapsack. There weren't a lot of big speeches.
Not a lot of monologues.
No.
I was waiting for something so much more. And
Ed Holly, you could have done the witch voice.
Johnny.
we didn't talk about her nearly enough. She was great.
She's great. She's good.
Yeah.
If you watch back on the movie, another fun thing that the commentary pointed out is that she had lost the stuff she was supposed to grab while she's doing The Conjuring. When the kid's laying on the table or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so she like stands over the bottles and she's doing this like waving motion like over the bottles, like whoo. But she's really just trying to find what she's supposed to pick up. But it worked. She was like, do I need to do that again? They're like, no, that's great, go with it. Anyway, all right, bye everybody.
Bye.